Hey, everybody, we're back. It's the Wildcast podcast. This is Michael Lev, senior writer and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star. I am joined today by Bruce Pascoe. We're sneaking in a basketball podcast, Bruce, before the start of football season. Once we hit next week, we are going to probably be doing 2 football pods a week. That's kind of our standard for the fall. And we will, of course, revisit basketball. Before I get to Bruce, real quick, I want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Pima Federal. Whether you're saving for your first car, buying a home, or growing your business, Pima Federal puts your goals first. They offer personalized solutions, competitive rates, and expert guidance every step of the way, because at Pima Federal, banking isn't just about money, it's about you. Learn more at pimafederal.org. Now let's bring in Bruce Pascoe from the bunker near the U of A campus. Bruce, how are you doing?
Pretty good. You know, hanging in there, trying to stay inside like every other August, it seems like.
Yeah, it's a little toasty in Tucson right now if you're not here. Temperatures into triple digits, but it's kind of what we expect this time of year. Little unexpected, little bit different summer for the U of A men's basketball team. They went to Lithuania for about 10 days or so.
Yep.
They played 3 exhibition games, which were streamed on YouTube, which was in and of itself an interesting experience to watch those streams. And I think the second one had some sort of announcers who were speaking in a language that I did not understand. I watched most of the first game, which was the worst game for Arizona by far. Anyway, the bottom line is they played 3 games. They went 2-1 on the trip. Normally, I would not put any stock whatsoever into the actual results of exhibition games like this, but I thought it was a good sign, Bruce, that they looked pretty bad in that first game, and they bounced back really nicely in the second 2 games.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's absolutely what happened. And I think that first game, they just went in there thinking this is the B team, whatever, they're not going to. I think they underestimated them, and I think this is what they learned out of this trip. This is a country, it's one of 2 or 3 countries in the world where basketball is the biggest deal. These guys grow up out of the crib playing basketball. They play with each other all the time. These guys on the B team probably have played together for years, and they're motivated. They're seeing a team that went to the Final Four, supposedly big deal, blah, blah, blah. They wanted to beat them really bad, and they did. And Arizona was just blindsided, I think, on top of not having 2 key rotation players and all that. And I think, and things like Caleb Holt probably trying too hard in his first game, wasn't too effective. But then, literally less than 24 hours later, they turned it around against, a weaker team, the Ukraine. But that was interesting to do it on little rest like that. And then they came back on Saturday and beat a pretty good team, not quite the true Lithuanian national team, but there was a handful of players that were on that team, and they were pretty good. And conversely, they weren't motivated as much, I don't think, and Arizona was to go out on a good note. In fact, that same team, granted, they had Tubelis the next day. Tubelis didn't play against Arizona, but he played against Michigan the next day, and they beat Michigan. So it just goes to show you that that's a pretty decent team that Arizona beat on Saturday.
Yeah, this is Tubelis. This is a name that Arizona fans are familiar with. One of Tommy's former players. I saw him saying that he kind of wishes that they had tried a little harder, or that NIL was a little bit more prominent when Zoo was, making his decision about whether to go pro or not. Pro, quote unquote, whatever that means these days. And that, maybe they could have gotten another year out of him, but he obviously is playing overseas and doing well, as did the Wildcats against that team without him. As you mentioned, they were missing some rotation players on this trip for a variety of reasons. JJ Mandequit was one of them, and this was a injury management situation. Is that probably the best way to put it?
Yeah, and I don't think he's been fully cleared yet for full contact, but he had a pretty bad break in his foot like in February in Washington last year, and he's been practicing in limited form, but not fully, and wasn't ready. And so I think I think they haven't said officially. I don't know if he's officially clear, if it was precautionary, but I don't think he has. I do think they are expecting him to be cleared, for preseason practices starting next month. So he should be okay. But that was a big loss. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Godfrey not playing, but without Maniquit, you had Derek Dixon, pretty much your only point guard out there they had. And Tommy Lloyd rested him quite a bit against Ukraine. Probably wisely so, because he ended up needing him 39 minutes to beat Lithuania the other night. He played literally almost every minute in that game. So that, because Maniquit out, I think we're going to see as the season goes, assuming Maniquit does get better, we're going to see Dixon still playing in heavy minutes, but he's going to move into that 2 spot when Maniquit's on the floor. If Holt's, either they go small with Holt shifting to 3, or if Holt's resting or in foul trouble.
Yeah. So JJ Maniquit is expected to be a heavy part of the guard rotation once he is healthy. Of course, without him, we saw more of Bryce James than we've ever seen before. I mean, he didn't play at all last season. So the fact that he got out there was kind of a big deal. I think his mom made the trip out there. They showed her a couple times during the feeds. What did you think of Bryce? Like, do you think he, it's a positive first impression, I would say, and at least maybe gives them something to think about as far as maybe being that 9th or 10th guy?
I didn't even, I didn't know what to think about him, because I literally haven't seen him play until then. So you're right. I mean, I was actually surprised that he started over Cameron Holmes, because I don't expect him to make the rotation this year, but he has gotten better from what I've heard. And everybody likes him. He's a good team guy and all that, as they say. But, I maybe 10th. And maybe he plays in, certainly he'll play in, situations where they're up comfortably and all that. He's definitely good enough to hold his own, but that way, and maybe he can carve out a role as like a 10th guy and maybe get in the games in a certain situation, a foul situation, matchups, whatever. But I think he's still a developmental guy for the most part, from what it sounds like. But he kind of held his own there. It looked like in those games. It's just hard to tell.
Sure. You mentioned that RJ Godfrey didn't play. We will address the reasons for that later in the podcast. The one other guy who did not make the trip at all was Mabil Mawut, and this is because of visa concerns if he had left the country and coming back in, right? Is that the story?
From what it sounds like, just piecing it together, they were just saying, visa issues or something like that. But, that's kind of what I heard, is that, and I think, a year ago, it applied to almost every international student. A lot of times there was a fear coming back in the country, your visa could be endangered, or you might not get in or whatever. And then he has the added complication of being from South Sudan and Uganda. So, I think they just didn't want to chance it. Plus, he's kind of like he's a developmental guy as well, who's not going to be in the rotation this year. He's a practice player for now. Maybe has the potential to develop, but so I don't think he would have had much impact in those games. It would have been good for them to have him go on the trip, just like everyone else, for the off-court stuff they did together. But yeah, it didn't sound like it was worth the risk.
Yeah, so there were a handful of guys who played kind of their normal roles, normal minutes. But man, Bruce, we saw a version of Ivan Kharchenkov in these 3 games that we really never saw last year. I mean, he looked amazing. Obviously getting the ball more usage than he had last year. He averaged over the course of the 3 games 26.3 points. He shot 58.5%. From the floor, chipped in 4 rebounds per game, also had 8 steals, 3 blocks. He looked like a top 10 pick to me. Look, and I know it's exhibition games, it's 3 games, whatever, but like top 10 pick, All-American, like he looked incredible.
Yeah, I mean he was projected to go late first round maybe if he had this year. I think he's based on that, certainly he's improved. I think the difference is you saw it a little bit when Pete and Aristo were out last year. He stepped up a little bit. He knew he had to be more of a primary option. I think he had 18 at Houston, if I remember right. But this was another level. I mean, and I think he knew, especially without Godfrey, Krivas is playing limited minutes. Holt was off. He had to be the guy, and he was, and especially, and he was in all 3 games. I mean, he he was the one guy. We talk about how they kind of let down maybe in that first game as a B team. He didn't. He played consistently all game, and that was the way he was last year. But I think last year he knew he had to be a secondary offensive guy. And he played his role. Plus, obviously, he's a lot more experienced. I mean, here's a guy, he came in at 18, just turned 19 before the season last year, and was already acting like a pro. He's been a pro. He literally has been a pro. He was playing high-level Germany before he even became a freshman. So he's just a different dude. And you're right, absolutely. He, as of right now, he projects as a solid first rounder, I would say.
Yeah, he put on a little bit of muscle in the off season when he was on our podcast earlier in the summer. He said he was up to 240 pounds, but it certainly hasn't made him any slower, because his driving was excellent. His finishing was really good. He also shot 6 for 15 from 3, which is 40%, which is probably about right where you'd like to be. There were even times where he was initiating the offense. So, and what a versatile piece to have. And he just looks like he's, on the verge of having a breakout season. What's super interesting about it, Bruce, is on that pod, he told us he did not pick up a basketball from the time the Final Four ended to he hosted that camp in Germany, which I think was 6 weeks or so. And I was sort of thinking to myself, imagine if he had actually picked up a basketball during that time. But you know what? Maybe he needed to get away a little bit, and just kind of regroup, reset, clear his mind before gearing up for the next season.
Yeah, I saw that response, and I thought it was quite amazing, because I mean, I'm not a coach and I'm not a developmental expert, but I'm a big believer in the mental thing about the game, because I've just seen so much of that over the years, and I think you do need to get away from it, and that was probably beneficial for him. And he probably did a lot of strength training, and maybe he ran sprints or 3-mile runs or whatever. I'm sure he kept in shape, but staying away from the gym is probably a good idea. Most of these guys usually only take about a week, and I usually ask them if I have a chance to see them in April or May or June and say, hey, how long would you do? And inevitably they almost always say, it took about a week, and then I got back in the gym. And I'm like, well, okay, but big picture, I don't know, and I also think injury wise, it's helpful to kind of do different things with your muscles than keep playing basketball 52 weeks a year. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert there either, but so I thought his response was really telling, and maybe, who knows, maybe that's playing a role. And I think if nothing else, you get in the gym when you get back, and maybe you're that much hungrier, Same reason you and I need to take vacations, 2-3 weeks, and just get away from this as much as we love it, just to be fresh. And I think he's that way with basketball. He loves basketball, there's no question, but there's other things they're good too.
Sure. So great start for Ivan in a new role. You mentioned Caleb Holt earlier, 5-star freshman, projected top 5 pick in next year's draft. He did not shoot the ball well. At all on this trip. He was 13 for 44 from the field, only 29.5%. Even from the foul line, he was only 6 of 13. But he averaged 9.3 rebounds a game, 4 assists per game, 2.5 steals per game. That is a player who's influencing the game, right? He also had one of the better plus minuses. Right. So even though he did not shoot well, he was a positive force out there on the court.
No, he was hustling, absolutely, but it just was off. In fact, I broke out his 2 points is only 32.1, 31.2% from 2. He's driving in, wasn't efficient, but he was working hard. I just feel like, I don't know, I haven't talked to him, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I'm just thinking, as highly rated as he was, and he's a genuinely, everything I've heard, he's a good guy. I think he means well, and he probably thought, especially with those guys out again, I got to carry this team and be the guy I'm supposed to be, and that can work against you mentally. And I got to think that's part of it, because he's a good shooter, and he's really good shooting at all levels, and he shot well at no levels. So it's just, that's not going to be him, I don't think. We'll see.
Well, we talked about it often with his Caleb predecessor, Caleb Love, that maybe you're not going to have your best shooting night every night, but there are other ways that you can impact the game, right? As a rebounder, as a defender, etc. And he definitely did that. in this game. He also had the second best plus minus on the team for the trip.
Yeah.
He played 100 of a possible 120 minutes. When you just look at him, he looks like an upperclassman. Like, he is really strong. He's well developed. Like, he seems like he's in great condition. His fitness is very high level. I think the shooting will come. I think it's probably a product of him, trying to do a little too much, pressing a little bit, trying to make a really great first impression. But like I said, influence the game in other ways, and that's a really good sign. Like, sometimes with a young player, when they don't shoot well, it will have a negative impact on them on the other end of the court.
Yeah.
They might sulk. You might see it in their body language. And we didn't see any of that with Caleb. So to me, that was a really good sign.
That's a sign of maturity. And here's a true freshman who's well beyond. He carries himself at a high level. I think all his experience has been really big time. Not only did he play for a high level prep program the last year, but he's been with USA Basketball, I think the last 3 or 4 summers in a row, gold medals, this and that. I mean, this guy, he carries himself at a high level. So yeah.
So a couple other guys in the rotation that I want to highlight. One of them is Drew Dixon, the new point guard, transferred in from North Carolina, right?
Yeah, Derek Dixon. Yeah, right.
I thought he was very just steady and solid, and gave them kind of exactly what you want from that position. He averaged 13.7 points per game, 15 assists, and only 3 turnovers. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really, really good ratio.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of what you expect from a veteran point guard coming from a, blue blood program. They were looking for someone they could plug and play, and I would say so far so good for Derek.
Yeah, he was exactly what you said. I think, the only thing and that was at a time when, again, Mandaquit was out, so he was doing it all himself. I think, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, does he take a little bit of that role that Jaden Bradley had, where he, he'll facilitate and do everything else, and then if really needed, he can hit a clutch bucket or drive and pick up a foul or basket, and that's something that Bradley picked up over the years, and was a 4-year player with that kind of experience. That's going to be hard to replicate. But Dixon, what we saw, he brought everything else you would look for. So I don't think he was everything you would expected, maybe more even on the.
He doesn't have to be anything more than the 4th best player on this team. Theoretically, right? You've got Kharchenkov, who we mentioned, you've got Holt, who we mentioned, and now there's Mo Krivas, who we haven't mentioned yet, who was kind of like on what I would call a pitch count, for those first couple games.
Load management.
Like a load management. There you go. I gotta get the sport right here. A little foot issue or ankle issue that he had taken care of earlier in the off season. So they're trying to manage his minutes and be smart about it. But when he was out there, he looked like, his usual self, right? I mean, he can score around the basket. He can be a defensive disruptor with his tremendous height, and even knock down a 3, which, is an expanding part of his game when he goes to the NBA. It's something that they're going to, ask him to do. He was 14 for 15 from the foul line, which is like, man, that for a 7'2" guy, I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I think that he's a unique player these days. You just don't get a lot of like guys who are that tall who have as much skill as he has.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think probably the most interesting thing is to know about he had this issue, and he played through it and did pretty well. So it does seem like it was a precautionary issue. I would think anytime you have a big guy in basketball that has a foot issue, that's a red flag. And especially if you're him and you already sat out, most of the 2 years ago with a foot issue, I think that's a cause for alarm. But certainly he didn't play like there's any issues. And Arizona is known for being super cautious with guys in this situation. Arizona has a really good track record of keeping guys healthy and, not breaking down. So that's probably a good sign. And yeah, he does everything. I mean, here once again, here's a guy who could have gone in the first round probably already, and he's coming back. So, good signs for Arizona for sure.
One more Lithuanian on the roster, and that's a transfer. And we're going to try to say his name here. Ugnius Yaroshevichus. Did I get that, Bruce?
Yaru. I've literally been practicing, and it's still not coming to me. But it's Yaru Shevicius, I believe. And the easiest way is to just say Oogie, because that's what everybody calls him. At least in America, that's what they call him, and he's okay with that. I asked him about that, because Ugnius doesn't seem that difficult to pronounce. Is he okay being called Oogie? But he is. So whatever. But anyway,
so we're gonna go with Oogie. And he was really productive at Central Michigan a couple of years ago, and he played only one game for Nebraska last year because of this back issue. And so that was like a little bit of a concern coming over here. Like you said, feet are always something that you worry about with big guys. Any guy who has a back issue is kind of the same deal. And he played really well over these two games, averaged 14 points, 6 rebounds, shot a really high percentage from the floor. I guess he's getting some treatment, or was getting some treatment before heading back to the States while he was still overseas. But assuming that he's healthy and the back holds up, and we don't think he's going to have to play starters minutes necessarily, this looks like a nice piece for them as they're trying to figure out that big man rotation that Tommy likes to use.
Yeah, I actually thought that he was probably the single most surprise to me anyway. I mean, because I think some of the guys we talked about, Dixon, we knew he is, really good. We knew Holt, not a surprise that Holt maybe would struggle a little bit, but obviously played hard. We knew Kharchenkov could step up, although not quite like that maybe. But Oogie just came out of, didn't come out of nowhere. We knew he could be good. I mean, I think the word was that Nebraska was actually counting on him to be a solid backup last year, but they never got him. He played one game, played pretty well in that, and then the next day it flared up again. And so that's the concern. Is he going to be consistently available? Is he beyond this? I mean, Tommy Lloyd said that he's done everything. He hasn't missed a training, this and that. He's been good. He played pretty significant minutes on this trip. And then he told reporters in Lithuanian, apparently, according to Arizona Sports, that he is going to Germany to get some treatment on the way back. So I think that's probably, I don't know actually what it is, but, because I wasn't there to ask him, and in fact, I tried to translate some of that and it wasn't working out for me with my little Google translator. So I don't know what he actually said, but in any case, whatever he's got to do. And he's got a couple weeks off now before they're going to start, real preseason practices. So, and for him, it is going to be a lot about availability and, how is he doing and all that. So it'll be interesting to see if he's on a permanent minutes restriction. Maybe there doesn't need to be. If Krivas can play 22 plus, there won't need to be, but he looked like when he was in there, absolutely looks like he can definitely be the top reserve in that post rotation. There doesn't seem to be any question about that. And he got to the line, shot well, scored well, was a good around the rim, just, and this was playing in he literally played that last game in his hometown. I mean, talk about pressure there. And he seemed to thrive in it.
So if you're a baseball reporter, it's probably beneficial for you to know Spanish in addition to English. If you're covering a Tommy Lloyd team, knowing some Baltic languages might be beneficial, Bruce. So maybe next off season, little project for you.
I think it would take 3 years just to get the pronunciation down, and then maybe you start learning it. But by the way, where do you go around Tucson to get lessons in Lithuanian? I don't know, but
I would say there's got to be. I'm sure you can do it on Duolingo or whatever. There's an app.
Yeah, but the thing is, the interesting thing about a lot of these Europeans, especially this younger generation, and whereas I've covered baseball and I've tried to interview Dominican players, and there's absolutely, and I took some Spanish, and there's literally no way some of those guys in the Caribbean, you can understand their kind of Spanish they speak. But the good thing for us with these guys is they all grow up not only learning English, but watching Netflix and stuff like that. They come over, they have a pretty good grasp. In fact, Ugi actually speaks very good English. He speaks of course he's been in the States for a few years too, but so there's no issue talking to him. The only issue is that during this particular interview there, after he said 2 questions in English, then the Lithuanian reporter started asking him stuff, and he's talking about his backstory and how he was doing with his back and the frustration at Nebraska, blah, blah, blah. And then he mentioned, oh yeah, I'm going to Germany for a couple of days to get some treatment. So that's how that came out.
Got you. So we got the gist, whether there was something was lost in translation or not. Going to Germany is, I think, something Kobe Bryant used to do when he was playing in the NBA to get some treatments that, maybe aren't necessarily available in the United States, but hopefully that'll all work out for Ugi. So the other guy who's, supposed to be part of the post rotation is RJ Godfrey, who was one of these, 5-for-5 exceptions that was able to sign with Arizona, and he went on the trip but did not play in a single game. To the best of your knowledge, Bruce, how would you explain why he did not participate in any of those games?
Well, from everything you can hear and read and people I've talked to, it's because he played in the Reese's College All-Star Game. And that is, his lawyer said he didn't take any money for it, but that is traditionally, anytime you play in these sort of peripheral Final Four end of season events as a senior, you're considered done. Traditionally, that was the deal. You played your 4 years at one school usually, and then you played in an all-star game or a 3-point contest or whatever. Maybe you got some, free whatever, and that was the end of your eligibility. And so it sounds like that even though, because the NCAA, that's really the only thing the NCAA can pin on him at this point, because he has a legal ruling in Georgia that says he has to be able to play. Sorry, NCAA. That's what that ruling says. So, but the NCAA is going this way and saying, well, he's technically not eligible because he's got some eligibility issues and he signed with an agent, played in this game. So then supposedly there's a lawsuit. Well, I don't even know this, and Arizona's not saying. The lawsuit says he was suspended for 4 games. And I don't even know if those were the 3X, if these are these games count, or are we talking 4 games in the regular season? What are we talking about? Nobody knows, and Arizona's not saying. Maybe Arizona doesn't even know. It's just, it's just one little pebble of in this whole ocean of craziness that's going on right now with the 5-on-5. Nobody knows what's going on with almost anybody, and obviously Arizona football has got more questions than that. So it was revealed, and it was discovered in a court filing that the NCAA hit Godfrey with a 4-game suspension because of his participation in this All-Star game, which is, I don't know, beyond ludicrous to me. I think the kind of desired outcome would be that these 3 games would count toward the 4. And if they do, and he only has to sit out 1 more game, although they do, it's not like they don't open against a softie, right? Like they kind of jump in. UCLA.
UCLA.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can control when that 1 game is, but I mean, maybe if that's the case, you just bite the bullet and say, okay, fine, whatever you want, NCAA, it's 1 game, we'll survive. If they try to impose the 4 games still on top of the 3 that he just sat out, man, I don't know what, the U of A's reaction would be in that situation. I would imagine that they would try to appeal it or fight it or something, because that doesn't really seem fair to me. And we're talking about someone getting punished multiple games for playing in an exhibition game that didn't count and for which he supposedly was not paid.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really understand it. I do know that back in the day, I've been covering this long enough to know that, yes, this absolutely was an eligibility issue. If this had happened 3 years ago, certainly 10 years ago or 15, I mean, but in this current environment, it's kind of a head scratcher, because none of these athletes are amateurs anymore anyway. So I don't even know why this rule is the way it is. And then you have the fact that allegedly he wasn't paid. Allegedly he didn't get paid by his agent. He didn't even know at the time he was going to be returning to college basketball, which is reasonable. He might have thought that there was a chance of this, that we all did. And back in April, we all thought, they might let all these guys in. But he didn't know for sure. So, he did enter his name in the portal, which I suppose you could argue is one indication that he thought maybe he was going to come back. But in any case, yeah, it does seem like a small thing in the big picture. But they're playing defense where they can, and for whatever reason, that is their rule. But I suppose by the book, and that's what they're pinning on right now.
Yeah. So we used to kind of mock players who put themselves in the portal when their eligibility was seemingly up. Like, why are you doing this? Like, this is dumb. But in his case, it was actually really beneficial, right? Like, it was a great move.
Really smart move. Yeah. I mean, why not put your name in? You never know. Like, but I don't think anybody's even think about it, and yeah, I mean, I know talking to both Awaka and Del Orso, I asked them both at various times during the spring, did you consider comeback? Would you want to? And this was before the 5-5 happened. And both of them are just kind of like, nah, I don't think so. Maybe I'll think about it or whatever. It wasn't like, not that, so they wouldn't enter the portal because they were, I'm sure
they just come back here.
They would have, but they weren't even really thinking about it. So, but Godfrey, yeah, it was a little interesting, different that way. So, I don't know. It's just so amazing, this tsunami of things that are happening. And yeah, all I can say is Godfrey was ahead of it. He hired a lawyer. He got in on that Georgia lawsuit, and boom, now he's protected and he was able to transfer. And worst case scenario, it sounds like, is he has to sit out 4 regular season games, which would put him back for UConn on, I think, the 18th of November. And that's not so bad if that's the case. But I suspect, as you do, that there will be a lawsuit or a challenge or an appeal and all kinds of things. And, probably he'll be fine by the beginning of the season.
Sure. So there are 3 other Arizona athletes that we know of who are trying to come back and play another season under this 5-for-5 umbrella. 2 of them are football players, linebacker Max Harris and running back Ismail Mahdi. Another one is a baseball player, right-handed reliever Garrett Hicks. Football is like a week and a half or so away from playing its first game. Harris and Mahdi came back to the team. They've been practicing with the team. However, the NCAA was granted a stay, if I'm using the right term here, on Friday, that basically at least temporarily blocked this Colorado ruling, which sort of applied to everybody. That's right. This kind of like opened the door for anyone to kind of, who was in this position of being a class of 2022 high school graduate, to try to pursue a 5th year. So now, and I wrote a column about this over the weekend, like, all these guys are in a state of limbo, and it really sucks for them, especially. Like, it's unfair. All of these rulings are so incredibly inconsistent that it just doesn't make sense. You've got, there's a football player, Bruce, Montana, who's going to be in his 9th year of college, who missed several seasons because of injuries. And he can play, and they're trying to block these 5th-year players from playing. I have no problem with the 9th-year guy. U of A football team's got some 6th-year guys. Hey, more power to you. You were able to get in under the bell before the 5-for-5 rule was instituted, where you get a waiver and come back for another year. Tristan Bounds, starting right tackle, is one of those guys. I have no problem with it, but I do have a problem when those guys can play and you're trying to block these other guys from playing for completely arbitrary reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they're just trying to do what they can, and they've said some things like they're trying to prevent people coming back and taking spots away from incoming freshmen. And there's been a few reports of things like that. Maybe a tennis player gets run off the team because a senior is coming back or whatever. That could be happening. But to me, it's the answer of what they did during COVID. Just they give everyone a grandfather and let them all be on the roster. And maybe that dilutes your NIL money or whatever. But, that's probably the only thing you could do there. But it does go back to, I had a conversation with Mick Cronin a couple of years ago, and his point was like, why does there have to be any limit? Who's to say somebody doesn't sue and he's 28 years old and wants to come back for his 10th year and tells the judge, you're limiting my potential to make money. As long as he takes classes, why does it even have to be 5 years as a limit? I mean, so I just wonder where this is all going to end. And it would, most people I've talked to said it only ends if they get to collective bargaining and these athletes are considered employees and unionized or whatever. And there's real, there's real actual guardrails around it because they're negotiated. And right now there's still none of that really. And so who knows about any of this? And I think you pointed out in your column that maybe there's a possibility the NCAA self-sabotaging. I thought that was very interesting that possibly the NCAA is doing this as if to tell Congress, hey, we're so things are so out of control. We need your help. And so far they've appealed and it's not getting them a whole lot of help, a little bit of movement here or there. But
yeah, I mean, I think the idea with the 5 for 5 is it streamlines everything. It eliminates the waiver process. It doesn't punish a player who pitches in one inning or plays in one game. It doesn't matter how many, you get 5 years. And also if Mick Cronin's idea were to come to fruition, and it was kind of seeing it in certain cases, it does hurt high school athletes who are trying to get to college because maybe there's fewer spots available for them, which kind of stinks in and of itself. But we're seeing now that there's a tight end who played at Ole Miss, who's been in an NFL training camp. Apparently he's being waived, and he's going to go play for LSU for his former coach, Lane Kiffin. So, I mean, it's spurred a lot of, jokes about the transfer portal now, applying to the pros as well as college. But I know it also, it turns a lot of people off. Is I think the biggest downside of it. It's the thing that to me, when I talk to fans, that kind of bothers them the most about the current climate is the unlimited transferring more than anything. You develop an attachment to a player and then they just turn around and leave after 1 year. Yeah. I think there's just so much movement and so much chaos that it's really not good for the sport, or not good to me, it's, even though it's produced some surprising champions and it's kind of opened the door for more programs to be competitive and compete for championships, like Texas Tech in softball or Indiana in football. I think overall it's turned off a lot of fans. Yeah, I think that's been a trend for a number of years, and I think people are aware of it and nobody can stop it. And I got to think at the college level, it's even more so because people are a lot of times rooting for their college teams because they went to college there and they feel like there's a connection with the player on the field. But now that player is playing for his fourth school. Does he really care about your school? Maybe, maybe not. It's a different deal. And also they don't get to know him. And I've always felt that the teams in college and the pros to some extent are, get the most support when they feel like they know the players. Like maybe the player's been there 2 or 3 times and they've heard him speak or they've read about him and they know his life story or whatever, and they can kind of relate to him or, whatever. And I think that's valuable, especially if your team isn't doing well, then they'll still support you. But I think if your team's doing well, like Arizona and Michigan did it or whatever last year, it doesn't matter. None of that even matters. People are just happy that you're winning. But if you're, I think it does hurt support, especially if you're not at that very, very top level. Sure, and that's part of our job too, is to tell their stories and help fans get to know them. And it can be kind of it can be unsatisfying experience, I think, as a journalist sometimes when you devote a lot of time and effort into profiling somebody and then they just turn around and enter the portal. Shortly thereafter. I felt that way a little bit about Umar Ballo when I wrote this big thing on him heading into the NCAA tournament. Although, in his defense, that was kind of a one-time opportunity for him to make a bunch of money, right?
Yeah, and he gave a bunch of years. It wasn't like he was a one-off. The guys that are crazy is sometimes you find out about a guy when he's a freshman in high school. So you write all these stories about him, and then sometimes I'll go watch one of his senior year games if I'm nearby, like in LA or Phoenix or something, and write all this stuff. and then he signs, and then he decommits. I can't tell you how many times. And you're like, why did I write 25 stories on this dude who didn't even wear the Arizona uniform? But it does happen. But I figure, you know what? Hopefully our readers are still interested in finding out about these guys when they're coming. And because of the access restrictions, a lot of times when they're recruits, you have more access to them. And so you tell better stories. And if they don't come, they don't come. That's the way it is. But yeah, it's a bummer that way.
Yeah, people are interested in recruiting, regardless of what the outcome is. If Arizona appears on a top 5 list or whatever, there's a certain adrenaline rush that you get from that. People just get excited. So we're recording this late Monday morning, and I would just say to people out there regarding especially the Arizona football players, do not be surprised if they file some sort of temporary restraining order. Take some sort of legal action, as others have in other states around the country, to try to become eligible for the 2026 season. Because if they don't, who knows how long it's going to take before the Colorado ruling appeal is heard, and who knows what the outcome of that is going to be. And who knows whether there's going to be suspensions like Godfrey received, because those guys paid money to agents to help them, work out for the NFL draft or whatever the case. So be on the lookout for the possibility of some sort of legal filings here in the state of Arizona on behalf of those players.
And I feel like I should back up a little in case anyone's not following this all day today, because you and I are so in the weeds on this stuff. But yes, Colorado is the big picture class action. So everybody in the high school class of 22, according to the Colorado thing, could play. If they played 4 years and they want a 5th, they're fine. But then they got the stay, so then that's not good. Then you have this other layer of there's a lot of little states where Godfrey and Georgia and some of these others have got their own victories that override that because they're named in it. So that's why he's protected. That's why the 2 football players are not, because they weren't part of them. But as you said, maybe they go ahead and do it. It's crazy. In fact, I wonder about those 2 football players. What is the vibe, or what is the word? Are they ready to go? If they were cleared to play on whatever it is, September 4th coming up, are they ready? Because Mahdi's just fascinating to me, because he was away from the game, working in the barbecue joint or owning it or whatever he was doing. Are those guys ready to contribute if they had to?
Yeah, the opener is September 5th against NAU, and I would say, based on my observations of the 2 of them in practice, that they would be able to play.
Okay.
Yeah, they've integrated Mahdi especially into 11-on-11 work, and he looks good. Yeah, he was a little slow to get started, a little bit out of shape. I thought Max Harris was in better shape, just watching them just running around on the side and stuff. But they're good. Those guys are good to go. They were here last year, so they know the scheme. There's very little in the way of a learning curve. Obviously, they did not participate in the entirety of off-season workouts, so they had a little catching up to do. But I think they'll be good to go whenever they're called upon. I don't think they're going to ask that much of them. It's more like depth, injury insurance, etc. But you know how football is. You could lose half your running back core could be wiped out by the time you hit October. Right. So the more quality players you have at a position like that, the better.
Yeah. I just think this football. To me, the football thing is fascinating because all the 5-on-5s. I mean, Godfrey's got plenty of time. It's going to work itself out probably. But these football guys need to know now. And they're in this unbelievably physical, crazy sport where they have to be in tip-top shape. And, that's why I said, are they ready? And now they've gotten ready. They don't know. So you're right. I think we could see, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something today or the next couple of days, certainly some kind of legal action that they're pushing for, or maybe maybe they become part of an Arizona case, or who knows what. I mean, they need to know by, they got 10 days to figure it out.
Yeah, not nearly as much of a sense of urgency for Garrett Hicks, the baseball player. Obviously, baseball is a spring sport. Yeah. They do have fall workouts. I think, he would need to be in school. But he was already pitching. He pitched a little bit in an independent league, a handful of games. So I don't know how that factors into things. I'm sure he got paid something for that. Does he have to pay back the money? But he be suspended? I don't know, but we're talking about a guy who was the leader on the team in ERA and saves last year. So that would be a nice piece to add to your bullpen if he is able to come back under that 5-for-5 ruling. All right, last question here for Bruce before we let him go and get back to his day job of breaking news and reporting and all of those things. We've got, I don't know what, like 2 months or so really before basketball really gets going. I guess the Red Blue is in late September. What are the goals, do you think, for the basketball team over this time period? What are they hoping to accomplish before things really start to ramp up again for the regular season?
Well, this trip got them a little bit of a jump start, I think, as Lloyd likes to talk about their culture build and they're getting the guys together and he's a big believer as much as turnover as there is every year of getting these guys to learn a little bit of history of Arizona basketball. He had them watch the Loot documentary on the flight over, things like that. So, but I think now they need to get rest, because you don't want to, the one danger in having these trips is then it becomes like this 10-month season by the time you get to April. So they need to get away from it for a couple of weeks. Once again, I'm talking about that. Maybe they don't feel that way, but I would think they would. In fact, the team that went to Israel in 23 lost to Clemson, was upset by Clemson in the Sweet 16. And, you kind of wonder, but anyway, maybe there's no connection, but I think after that, it's just a matter of coming back in September and October. And they've got, hopefully for them, they get Godfrey back. They get, they'll have Godfrey in practice, of course, but maybe they can get him back for the exhibition games in October, and then getting Maniquit back and working that out, and then starting to get a feel for their rotation. Because, I think one reason they were so good last year is they were ready out of the gate, unlike the year before when they had a lot of problems figuring out their rotation and where was Carter Bryant going to play and this and that. And they really struggled early on in that 24-25 season. Last year, they were ready to go out of the gate. They beat Florida, they beat UConn, beat UCLA, all these things. And they had it going because they had really fine-tuned things in October. And so I think that's a lot of it. But it does look like if they get those two guys back, that they've got a pretty clean 8-man rotation, and just gotta get working with it and get guys to know each other and get Derek Dixon comfortable with all of these guys and Maniquit as well.
Yeah, I feel like 5-for-5 had a different meaning a couple years ago for basketball. Wasn't their record like 5-5?
Oh yeah, I think at one point, at one point,
at the start of the season,
it was 4-6. I think, I don't know, but yeah, it was unlike anything you've seen since maybe Sean Miller's first year or something. They were really struggling, and it was just they weren't sure. Krivas was having that foot injury, and they were trying to play him, and he was okay, and it was that was weird. And then where to put Carter Bryant and was a big part of it too. And then they went to the Bahamas, and that's one of those fast moving tournaments where you can get slammed, and they got slammed. The things happen back to back, and boom, before you know it, you got 2 or 3 losses, and that's exactly what happened to them. So, but they recovered and had a decent end to it. But they weren't ready, and I think maybe that helped them last year realize what they have to do in the preseason. So I think they got, they've got some of that to work on, but they'll have a lot of opportunities. And then this year, maybe worth noting is they've now allowed 3 exhibition games, so there'll actually be 3 coming up as well. So they'll have some pretty good opportunities to really kind of fine tune things on the court. So basically, on the court, I think, is what they need to work on as much as possible now.
Red Blue Showcase is September 26th. That's a 2:30 p.m. afternoon affair at McHale Center on a Saturday. There's a U of A football game at Washington State that I think starts at 4:30. So they try to kind of sync those two things. 3 exhibition games, as you mentioned, they are all at McHale. San Francisco on October 13th. San Diego State, that's pretty high profile opponent right there, on October 16th. And then Eastern Washington, I was going to say Eastern Michigan, Eastern Washington on October 23rd, before starting the regular season against UCLA in Las Vegas on November the 2nd. Bruce, In the meantime, you should try to take a little bit of time off yourself if you can. I know we got to monitor all of these like court hearings and all of this stuff,
Yeah,
but
that's
you know what the grind of the season is like. So
yeah.
take a little time for yourself if you can.
Yeah, about a month left, but there is some loose ends with this stuff, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, I always feel like the Red Blue game is sort of where you kind of put your life aside for the next 7 months or so, and that's just the way it is. But it's fun. It's just you have to I have a lot of other things I got to do like before that hits. That other things to do in my life but you get used to that.
Well, we all have those honeydews, right?
Yeah.
That we need to take care of before our seasons really get going. Of course, the football season starts on September 5th, as mentioned, and we will having probably 2 times a week. Some weeks there'll be only one, but 2 times a week we'll be hitting you up with podcasts about the U of A football team. Big 12 Bonanza will be back, where we embarrass ourselves with our terrible picks. You, of course, can subscribe to and listen to the Wildcast on Apple and Spotify. You can check out our respective layers here in Tucson by watching the video version of this pod on Tucson.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks to Bruce for joining us. We will see you guys next time.
Thanks a lot.